This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Avella, brought to you by Sit and Cards.
Welcome to the Rugby Pod, episode 35, made possible by the good guys at Sit and Cars. Remember, Black November, the entire month of November, special deals on special cars, don't miss out. And Harry's back. How's Barry?
How's it, MV? I know next time I'm in Pretoria, I'm going to go see Andrea Pri Lorenzo. I want to buy a car from him. I'm going to negotiate really hard. I heard he's a good man, though.
Tough negotiator. Good luck with that. Listen, we thought it might be a good idea to spend this episode talking about this upcoming autumn internationals. And it's funny the way this suddenly feels like something substantial. All those, we use, the Springboks are going overseas again. But this year it feels a little bit different to me. Tell me what the importance of this autumn internationals are. How does it fit into the bigger scheme of things, and what does it mean?
Yeah, on the one hand, something great about rugby is we don't require babysitting like the rest of the sports. Like nothing matters unless it's the Grand Slams in tennis or the Grand Slam, the big opens in golf, or soccer is famous for not caring at all about matches because they're just friendlies. I was one time I was climbing in Utah in the mountains on my annual retreat to get away from all things, and I happened to be paired up with a British guy who was a big football fan. We were climbing ropes like ice, snow, sheer cliffs. So you got to get to know each other. And he said, "What are you listening to?" Because I had my AirPods in. And I said, "I'm listening to the Box play England, like while we're climbing a mountain." And he goes, "Oh, so is it a big deal?" And I go, "Yeah, it is. And we just won." And he goes, but it's a friendly, right?" And I said, "There's no friendlies in rugby. There's no friendlies in rugby. It's what makes our whole sport different." Most of us who are true fans know the overall ledger between us and another team. We kind of know it generally, not like we could say 26 to 23, but we know generally where we sit. The end of year rugby union internationals, otherwise known as the Autumn Nation Series or the Spring Tour, the end of year tour, it doesn't have any organization. It's chaotic. Some teams play 3, some teams play 4, some play 5. But generally speaking, especially the North, uses it as a balance of power benchmark or metric. Like, we caught up to you, or, we're about to challenge you. It's always them catching up. They've never had the upper hand for longer than about a year at a time. And it used to be the big 3, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa would go. Now it's sort of the rugby championship in general, plus Fiji, 5 powerful teams from the South coming up North. No fear, expecting to win more than they lose, and then you have very powerful teams waiting to try to destroy them. Ireland, France, and then to some extent England, Wales and Scotland being more the bit players in this play. But it shapes as, number one, a moneymaker. New Zealand's making £2 million from one match and £1 million from another match. That's straight up outside the window money. That's why they're playing 5. People like Rassie Erasmus are more using it as a way to finish up a season successfully, get to 11 wins like last year and reclaim number 1 and show that we can go wire to wire. Stop with the experimentation and just pound some people. Ireland is thinking about a way to say, no, in the end, we were the best in the year. If we finished on number 1 and we beat you in Durban. And England's putting it as this is a rebirth and we're on the right track. Everyone's got a story. So it's unlike a tournament where you in the end say, we won. It's more like everyone's got their own narrative, their own story, and everyone's got their built-in excuses too. Like, we didn't have Finn Russell for the first match, or, well, it was the last match of the whole year, so we were tired. But it's okay because rugby's like that. That's our beautiful sport is, we're not like all the other sports with a clean, neat, organized system. We're kind of haphazard. The one note I will make is our world ranking systems, which I would say 8 or 9 years ago, were really horrible. They didn't have the right, I don't know, they had something that wasn't inside those, the running averages or something. It wasn't coming out right. I'd say going into this year, the final autumn push, spring push, they look pretty solid. We're always going to argue about number 1 versus 2, Ireland, South Africa, but the fact of the matter is, if Ireland loses one at home, just like if we lost in Durban, and we did, they'll lose the number 1 ranking, and we'll take over unless we stub our toe. So I think in the end, sitting in December, it might look very much like a proper ranking system just for this year. I'm not talking about World Championship, Rugby World Cup. We got that. We got that for 4 years. But just the idea of form. And so that's why it's exciting, because you have teams like Fiji at number 9 who could finish up number 6. It's exciting because you have teams like Australia that are in the doldrums, and they could claw their way back in maybe by beating someone. So, yeah, I think it's time. It's time for Test rugby again, and I know everyone's excited.
So what are we pitching here? We're pitching the South, the cream of the South, call it that, versus the cream of the North. And seeing that I'm a Southerner, Southern Hemisphere, if you want to call it that. Let's talk about the Southern teams firstly. Like you said, mostly Rugby Championship plus Fiji as a sort of a bonus or an ace up our sleeve here. Talk to me about those 5 teams. What do we need to know about them?
Yeah, very different stories, right? What we talked about all year on this show was how South Africa, not just inside the team and in the coaching box, but also us, followers, fans, pundits, etc. We have to learn to win when we're favored. And this is when it all comes down to it. It's a very short tour for us, 3 games only, no excuses, just 3 games. Because of the platooning all the year, people are rested. Yes, there's some injuries, but we're less injured now than we were at the end of the Rugby Championship in general. And there's people coming back like Sos and Archie is very, very fit right now and in form. So we have a lot of ability to just clean slate, right, to win. But it's not enough. I don't think that South Africa should grade itself just on winning or barely winning when it's a 3-match tour, including teams that we have to spank, really, like Wales. So I think the way we look at this is no losses is the bare minimum, 3-0, bare minimum. But it shouldn't even be close. It shouldn't be close against England in particular. If England manages to do another semi-final, gripping, got to make a kick, that's not good enough. It's okay if we win, but that's like a B minus. I think we need to post record scores against Wales and Scotland because that's where we are and that's where they are at the moment. And it's a sign that we know how to put teams away and run up a score. And so that might be where we use a different team lineup than against England. For example, there are players in the box setup that really know how to put the foot on the gas and keep going. And maybe that's the setup we have there. And then we have players that know how to build a score and do the slow poison of box. So maybe that's the only variation here, but we need to do that. The other thing is that I think it's not acceptable to have this many cards. The Springboks were one of the least carded teams in the World Cup. And this year we've been just bang average, which is not good enough. So I think I would go into the tour and I would have the whole team and I would just say, guys, we're not going to get any cards. Anyone who has a card, you're buying beers and dinner for all of us. Inside the camp, I'm talking about accountability. You lied to me. You said you would get no cards. No one gets a card. Penalties, sometimes penalties are good. So less than 10 penalties a game, but unless the penalties were good, because there are early in the game, if you want to keep someone out, England's on the run and they might score the second try of this, just make sure they only get a 3. I get that. But in general, I would say in 3 matches, no cards, less than 10 penalties average. We need to have scrum penalties on the first engagement because we don't get the second. And then successful line-out variations. As we move and more towards the dependence on the line-out as launch pad, with the maul being a 1-stop, the scrum being a 1-pen, the line-out itself will become more and more crucial. So I think you have internal metrics like sweep everyone away, win by at least 10 against England, and crush Scotland and Wales by record scores. But show us that you are able to keep other metrics down. And the final one would be points per entry. So all the top club teams track this is when you get into the 22 of your opponent, let's say you get in there 7 times, 8 times in one match, because that's where most of the time tries are scored from. But what is your average points per entry? This is something you can look at with the Bulls. and see that they've been very good, and not only on getting in, so the denominator, but the numerator is also high. So I get in there a lot and I come away with 3 to 4 points per entry. You're going to win most games. You get in there 8 times, you score 4 points. That's enough. 32 points is enough to win a game. So the Boks should be getting 4 points per entry. That is a metric we were not that good at during the Rugby Championship at times. We wasted a lot of we camped out on the 22 and came away with nothing, or we came away with less than 3. So I do think that those are the metrics I would look for. So is that arrogant? No, I think it's not. I think it's knowing where you are in life, realizing that if you want to get back to number 1, you have to win everything. But if you want to get back to 1 as well, you have to win big, because the margin of victory also goes into the World Rugby rankings. I think you want to get Rassie the Coach of the Year. I think you want to get the Team of the Year. And I think you want to build a story through this cycle. Like Andre Pollard said recently on another pod, we want to be the best team ever. That's not arrogance. That is the only next thing to look for. I mean, what else would it be? We want to be okay. We want to be one of the top 7. No, I think they want to get the title. So that's what South Africa has to do. It's a tough one, guys. It's but doable, because it's only 3 matches compared to the All Blacks 5.
That comes down to that underdog thing that we have to get over. We feel apologetic if we have stretch targets. And it's not a stretch target to say that you want to have the fewest cards, you want to do this and that, like you just explained it. It's simply an acknowledgement of the fact that we are now supposed to be the favourites, and we have to get that in our minds. And I think the Springboks actually are there, don't you think?
I think they're wearing the mantle okay. I think the crown, fits on the head now. I think part of that was, I think Rassie was keen to do that. And I think by picking Tony Brown, he was sending a message along those lines. Tony Brown played for the All Blacks. I actually I went back and watched the year 2000 match, 46-40 at Ellis Park. Rassie Erasmus was playing against Tony Brown. And I wanted to see whether the guys ever clashed. They maybe had some fights, punches thrown. Tony Brown was a nuggety. He's short, but he's a strong defender. And Rassie was a wild flanker. He was all over the pitch. He was doing offloads and stuff. But there was one moment where actually Tony Brown crunched Rassie. I thought that was hilarious. But the role reversal is interesting between the All Blacks and the Springboks. The All Blacks are learning for the first time in their history that sustainably they're not the favorites. They will not be the favorites in Dublin. They will not be the favorites in Paris. They were not the favorites in Cape Town or Johannesburg this year. They might have been not the favorites 5 times in 50 years. They were traditionally on the betting markets, the favorites, and now they're not. And they are not doing very well at being underdogs. In the 2 matches that they had as underdogs, they lost. And they lost like underdogs do. They lost because underdogs usually beat themselves at the end by lack of belief, by game management issues, by mental issues. That's why they lost. They should have won in Ellis Park. They could have won at Cape Town, but they played like people that shouldn't win. The Springboks are doing the opposite thing. Is now, how do we go where everyone who plays us thinks it's the match of the year? Ireland losing their mind in Durban, on the piss for the next 5 days. Remember how they ran off like they were. You couldn't be happier than they were. It was the biggest win of their history, bigger than the one in New Zealand, because we've replaced New Zealand as the aura team. Just talked to legendary commentator Tony Johnson today, and he said that. He said, you've taken our aura. Like, now you are the swagger. Now people go into games with the Boks thinking the Boks will find a way to win at the end. And that's what the All Blacks used to have. So I think you're also looking at 2 teams on different trajectories, which is the All Blacks are trying to learn how to play this role and not keep stubbing their toe when they play against Ireland or the French.
I just want to touch quickly, before we move on to the other Southern Hemisphere side, South Africa's going to play Scotland, England, and Wales. You mentioned Wales, we should give them a proper hiding. Just in terms of those teams, are they the right teams to be having this kind of stretch targets against? Like, I know Scotland, I'm a little worried. Frankie Smith had a bit of a funny smile on his face. I don't know. It worries me. He came to Loftus and upset us all. Maybe he's got a Murrayfield surprise lined up for us as well. Just talk about those 3 teams quickly, just so we can get a bit of a sense of reality almost.
I think we always want to draw too many parallels from club rugby to test rugby, and we say this to ourselves. Well, how could it be that different? It's the same players. I mean, look at this, the same guys here. Like, shouldn't you just look at club rugby and extrapolate from that result? No, because the weakest players on the field is what makes test rugby so much stronger than club rugby. Look at the weakest players, 5 weakest players on a test team in the Springboks. Think about who those are. Geez, they would be great for the Bulls. They would be starting, like all of them would be starting, and they would be some of the best players. So there's no holes. Scotland doesn't have the ability to multiply and like boost and bolster their strengths at Edinburgh or Glasgow. They're just going to top out Glasgow plus a couple of people from Edinburgh. That's it. Get a guy from Bath, Finn Russell, who won't even be available at the beginning of these games. So then you have to knit them together. The Springboks are well knitted. The coherence between them, people know that their brain is in Bokland. Ibn Etzebeth can go from Sharks, immediately go into Bokland, and it's a different level. Everyone who's gone into the camp who was new realizes it. Talk to a guy like Ben Jason Dixon, talk to even an old hand like Andre Pollard, who was out and then came in late to the World Cup. The difference of what it looks like. So I think it would be a tremendous backward step to lose to Scotland, because Scotland can be out-muscled. They can be, you can just almost play normal rugby and beat them. If you just play your best game, you beat them. Doesn't matter what happened to the Bulls. Doesn't matter about Glasgow. This is different sauce. You have a pack that is the pack of the world. This has been acknowledged by Ireland and the French and the All Blacks. Springbok pack comes at you in droves. If one player is having a little bit of an off night, then he gets substituted and the guy comes on with fire coming out of his nose. So there's just no respite. There's no refuge on the field for the Scottish pack, and they get out-muscled. So it may not be sexy. It may not be the way we'd like to see, us play and win. But Finn Russell was running the best attack in the world going into World Cup, ranked 5th in the pool game in Marseille, and they scored 3 points. So that's the problem for Scotland. They just won't be able to score Duhan spectaculars. No one's going to run away. Duhan's not going to run away from the Lekkerbacks. They don't get off the floor quick enough, and then they cannot do muscle ball. So it's all on us if we lose or even close against Scotland. It's something very wrong if that happens. The levels are now too big between Scotland and South Africa. So, Scotland is happy to get South African players that would not make the wider training squads of the box. The only one who might get a look in would be Duhan, but he doesn't have the defensive swivel back ability to play what we play. So no, I don't buy any excuses going into this tour. The only one that poses an actual threat would be the semi-finalist England that took us to the wire. And that's all the more reason why we want to set a marker in Twickenham. We want Twickenham man, as they call them, the fictitious guy that drives up in his Range Rover or his Lamborghini and he's a financier in the city. That's Twickenham. We want those guys to leave early. We want them to grumble. We want them to write letters to their member of parliament and be sad. This is always one of the great fixtures in world rugby. We will have adequate representation. 20,000-ish Saffers Abroad will be there in London, having their full voice as well. And we always have to beat England and beat England well. So I think it sets up as a perfect thing inside excellence, which is don't even act like it's going to be a big deal if you win 3 out of 3. Come back to me and show me that you had no cards. Come back and show me your points per entry. Establish your defensive packages and sets perfectly. No missed reads. Come back after every game and be able to show me, Curtly, where you bit in and why. Jesse, I want you to burn your man on the outside at least twice a game. And have these kind of internal metrics. And that's where you really succeed, is if you're hard on yourself and you don't treat your opposition as a foe or an enemy. They're almost incidental. if you're a really, really good team. If you are, as you think you are and say you are and assert you are, one of the great teams in Springbok history, you shouldn't be worried about Wales, which is barely hanging on against Italy and Georgia.
Right. For me, the matchup of the series, the first one this weekend, England versus New Zealand. Now, we know what England did in New Zealand, or almost did. And you mentioned to me before, for example, that the All Blacks managed to pull that one game out of the fire by finishing strong in the last 20 minutes. That's been a weakness of theirs since. And they've got a bit of a different approach there with McKenzie coming off the bench and the likes. Talk to me about that game. Let's start talking about the All Blacks then, and specifically in terms of this upcoming match.
Yeah, the All Blacks have quite an entree here. They started out with a little bunny in Japan, but the meat of their tour is a hat trick of matches: England, Ireland, and France. I mean, that's a hell of a stretch.
Yes.
And in one of those, I think there's a 6-day turnaround. So they have put something on themselves, and all credit to Razor, and I wish him well. These are the times of the year where we get to just cheer for the South, and we want the All Blacks to do well. I think I want them to smash England. So I think the interesting part of it is this is sort of the third match in a 3-game series in 2024. It's difficult to play a team 3 times and win 3 times. You know, the one that loses keeps making adjustments. The one who wins keeps going, oh yeah, we got these guys. But how did you get these guys? You got these guys from Beauden Barrett brilliance. I mean, I saw a man take a ball out of the sky with one hand, charge, chip, and then kick on the rebound, a volley. He volleyed the ball before it came down on his foot again. And then New Zealand scores. That's what you had to do to beat England at home. It never looked comfortable. It was exactly the reverse of the Rugby Championship, where the All Blacks became the best 1-hour team, but they couldn't play the final 20. They were the almost Blacks. It actually, during the games against England early on in the season in July, they had to rely on late game brilliance. So you thought, oh, okay, the All Blacks are back. You know, they're not great, but they're going to mentally be tough. And then they folded in Cape Town. So I think this sets up very interestingly because, you know, England's a different team at home. Let's be honest. They've got a really good team on paper. I know it's not played on paper, but if you look at the pack, they should be able to, I don't know, bully the All Blacks, but they should be able to be better, bigger, stronger. And the backs are quicker now. They have some really high athletic talent in the back. So I don't think Anton Leonard-Brown's going to run away from anyone in the England back line. You've got George Ford and Marcus Smith, you know, proper, you know, field generals against Beauden Barrett and Damian McKenzie. Damian McKenzie is the suspect. He's the one that we don't know. Cam Roygaard coming back from a long, terrible, very, very serious injury at 9. It's one of those banana peel games, you always say, right? There's a possibility here that All Blacks get caught napping. England has, interestingly, not picked Sam Underhill, but whereas the All Blacks have persisted with Sam Cane. You could look at those two guys as sort of similar players, and they're just hard tacklers, concrete shoulders. Sam Underhill, whenever he plays, you always go, wow, why hasn't he got 100 caps? Because he just looks like a proper rugby player. He's got no neck. He looks like a cartoon. But he's been dropped, and instead they have both Tom Curry and his brother Ben Curry on the other cunt. And he is teaming up with Alex Dombrandt. And I think what Borthwick is doing there is he's saying, I got a 6-2 bench. I'm going to have 4 loose forwards, 5 loose forwards running around. We're going to be better at the breakdown. We're going to beat you at the breakdown because Sam Cane's not who Sam Cane used to be. And Sam Cane, even at his best, was never McCaw. But we're going to have flood the breakdown with proper loosies. And we're also got a little more speed at the end. So he's picked a team with 6 Saris, 5 Quins, 3 guys from Bath, 3 from Sale, 2 Bristol, 2 Chiefs, 2 Tigers, and 2 Saints. And it's interesting because the way he's picked them, it looks like to me that Borthwick thinks that he's figured out how they lost. When I look at Razor's team, it's sort of more the same except for injury. So I don't know if Razor has ever figured out yet at Test rugby level why he wins and why he loses. That sounds kind of stupid for me to say. Like, why wouldn't someone not know? Why would someone not know how they won or lost? I do think that's the actual difficulty at Test rugby level, is to parse out and sort of tease out, I think they say that in statistics, how do you tease out the real cause for close games and why you won and why you lost? I never felt like Razor figured that out in Ellis Park, which is why Cape Town happened. I don't think he actually left, I think the Argentina loss for All Blacks was similar. They keep doing more of the same, double down, triple down. So if you had to compare the intellect of these two coaches, Borthwick versus Robertson, I'd take Borthwick. If you had to compare the sheer talent, I'd take the All Blacks. So it's a matter of could players like Bowden Barrett, Cam Roygard, who are brilliant, just kind of, no matter what Razor's saying it, oranges, just go, I don't care. We're gonna do this thing, and we're gonna do something really crazy, and it's gonna work. But I'm like you. I mean, start out with a bang. The series starts out with one of the juiciest matchups in world rugby. The white versus the black at Twickenham, the forces of Southern trickery and talent against the, bully, strong English. It sets up like a beautiful story. I cannot wait to sit down as a neutral, but obviously I don't want England to win.
Let's talk about the New Zealand's cousins across the channel, or the gully. What do you call it? The ditch. That's the Australians. I see there's now talk about maybe getting Joe Schmidt to stick around after the British and Irish Lions. There's a lot of moves afoot in Australian rugby. They're making plans. You can see there's a bit of a new broom in there. It's looking a bit more positive. What do you think they can expect from the end of the year, and who they're playing against?
It's almost perfect, this cascade, right? So Boks can only be successful if they win all of them and have their key metrics right. New Zealand could drop one, probably to Ireland, and they would not like it, but a 4-1 tour is going to be okay. They can handle that. They can feel their way through that. I don't think New Zealand can handle losing to England, by the way. Australia just needs to win 2 out of the 4. So they have the Grand Slam, all the home nations, right? No one is expecting Australia to beat Ireland right now. It would be a miracle. It would be such a huge upset. It would be devastating for Andy Farrell and his guys. It would be such a shock. I'm not saying he couldn't do it. I'm just saying no one's expecting that. What they do expect Joe Schmidt to be able to do is to do what Dave Rennie did, which is beat Wales in Wales. They want Joe Schmidt to do what Joe Schmidt already did, which is beat Wales twice. And so it would be a huge backward step for Australia to lose to Wales. The forward step of beating Ireland is not being asked for. No one's saying you have to do that, Joe. You gotta beat Wales. So that's the gotcha. The second one is, if you beat Scotland, you've announced something. You've announced that you are a different team, because Scotland's no joke. And against Australia, it's a good matchup. Scotland can actually trouble Australia. Mm-hmm. Australia's got some weak defense. Scotland can score if you give them any room. And it's not like Australia's bench can muscle Scotland. Their starting pack, I think, is too muscular for Scotland. But I think when you get into the deep part of the game, it's a proper matchup. So let's say Australia wins against Wales and Australia. I mean, Wales and Scotland, successful tour, very successful tour. Everyone will be happy with 2-2. And then the caveat there is, don't get squashed by Ireland and England. Make it competitive. Be in the match against England, scare them, maybe get a kick, maybe don't get a kick. That's good. And on Ireland, don't get embarrassed. That's an interesting position to be. Joe Schmidt took this job knowing that he's in a perfect position for a coach. The devastation to the Wallabies in the World Cup, the rocky road, the lack of belief, all the noise. He just comes in, and all he's got to do is just kind of be okay for a while. And he's going to have that big honeymoon, because everyone knows the Lions are coming. And if he can just find his team, figure out who he wants from overseas. He hasn't even played that card very much. He could, like a guy like Izzy Perez, he's just tearing it up for Leicester Tigers. Pete Samu for Bordeaux. He hasn't even played cards. He could. But if he can just find his core team from domestic players and be okay, beat Scotland, go 2 out of 4, and maybe scare England, he's okay. Now, hope to dream. what if he beats England? Okay, there's no country in the world besides, well, maybe no country in the world that loves beating England more than Australia. Look at the cricket ashes. Look how the whole country's shut down. So yeah, I think that would be the holy grail, and it would certainly, to me, at that point, Joe Schmidt would be talked about getting a longer contract. Right now, he's not signed up for that long. I think if he came away with 3 wins going into Lions next year, having played 3 of the 4 Lions teams, I know they'll mostly be Irish, but still there'll be plenty of Englishmen in the Lions team. So if he can do that, I think he will. You'll see Joe Schmidt finally smile, dance, and get drunk.
In terms of the approach of England and Ireland towards the Australia games, do you think they're going to go full strength, or they're going to go maybe, it's a bit of a weaker side, given the second string as a kind of a run? I think Scotland and Wales, like you said, they're going to see those as 2 possible wins. They're going to go full out for it. But Ireland and England don't you think they might just hold back a bit and spare the horses?
Yeah, I think, New Zealand won't. New Zealand, that three game series, that 3 game in the middle, you're going to see their best available. Razor has always done that so far. He's never done any experimentation. I think to his peril. I think he should have in the Rugby Championship probably blooded more players and done more things. But he's New Zealand's about South Africa. Like you don't get to lose very much when you're a coach. I mean, the Wolves are at the door. So he has to keep winning. Australia is different. Australia can literally tell their people and their players against Ireland, we shouldn't win this. I want to see some different players in different matchups. I do think also they have the ability to still win against Wales and play a guy like Tane Edmed at 10 instead of Noah Lolosio. Noah's been okay, but he's kind of just okay. He's a bit like, I don't know. He's like a serviceable fly-off who just shovels the ball on, and he's a good kicker. But Tane Edmed is a guy that I like a lot. He led the attack in the NPC this year, played in North Harbour, and he's a proper Wallaby firebrand. Got that red hair, but also he's got the presence on the gain line. He smashes people, and his dad was a prop in league. So I think Joe wants to see people like that. He named them for a purpose. There's the new signing, Joseph Suaalii, who just physically reminds one of Izzy Folau in that he has athletic superiority. A bit like how Fassi can sometimes just burn someone. You go, you could do that all day. If you ever gave Fassi that much room, it would be, a good night. So I do think Australia has some athletes that they don't produce very often in the Celtic lands. I don't think Wales has anyone like him right now, for example. So you could see him putting someone in there and play him at wing, kind of shield him a little bit from the tactics of the game and just go, Joseph, if you have space, just look at your opposite man and ask yourself, who's better, you or me? You're better. You could beat someone one-on-one. You always did. You always could. Plus, Joseph Suaalii played union in schools. He went to a private school and where they played rugby union. And if you've just seen any highlights of him, guys, check it out. Plug in his name and look at his highlights in league. There's things you do in league that translate very well. And one of them is fending and smashing your guy trying to tackle you. If you can do that, there's probably a place for you in rugby union. So I'm excited about Australia. I think it's interesting. They are the ones out of this whole list that have the least to lose, the least pressure. They have freedom. So they could just take a wild, hot swing against England, knowing that they could change the whole narrative of the whole. They would be the top headline. The Wallabies beat England in Twickenham. Oof. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking maybe if Ireland and England held back the horses, maybe, not play their best against Australia, thinking that it's not that important a game, that might open the door for a maybe surprise victory.
Yeah, and also by that time, let's see, when do they play? Australia goes England straight up. So no, but by the time Australia plays Ireland, that's at the very, very end of the whole thing. I mean, Ireland will have some injuries. So will the Wallabies, but yeah, it will not be full strength versus full strength. Aussie versus Ireland at the end.
All right, let's talk about Argentina. I mean, they've had probably their best year ever, I would think, in their minds anyway. They beat the All Blacks, the Australia and South Africa in the Rugby Championships. I mean, that was more than they would have ever expected. South Africa took proper revenge. New Zealand took proper revenge. Australia didn't take proper revenge. But Felipe Contamponi certainly made a difference there. What can they expect from this tour?
This is interesting. I paid attention to Argentina in the World Cup last year because of the fan base and how well they traveled. My understanding is that Argentinian fans have bought up a lot of tickets for these 3 matches as well. So Argentina is like South Africa, playing only 3. And I think that's to their benefit. So they won't have to deal with extreme depth issues because Argentina isn't that deep. But their top 20 players are really good top 20 players. The second thing that I like about Argentina's schedule is they start with Italy, which they should do very well against. There's a huge tie between Italy and Argentina. A lot of the players in Argentina are Italian by ethnic origin, and many Italian players are really Argentinians who had qualification. Castro Giovanni, Sergio Parise, the greatest Italian player, is an Argentinian guy. So I think they're comfortable back and forth. All the games for Argentina, well, the first one and the final one, they're not very much like away games. They're a bit like home games. So many of them play in Europe. Many of them play in Italy or in France. So you're going to have a team of Pumas that are very comfortable in playing in Europe. Second, I like the order in which they start with the easiest team, Italy, first, and then playing the French when the French could maybe have lost interest or waned and catch some cold. Argentina has always played the French well. They played the French well this year. They split those games. And I don't think I think their passion of their the traveling fans, how many Argentinians will be in those games. A lot of Argentinians live in Europe, and so it's easy for them to get there. But yeah, I wouldn't sleep on them. This is interesting. Argentina should beat Italy and could beat one of Ireland or the French. I don't see them going 3 wins. I don't see that, and I don't think anyone's thinking that they should have to. But if they come away having beaten one of the top 4, one of Ireland or France, they will have finished the year not only in their best year in the Rugby Championship, but I would say as a whole, as a test year, one of their best years in history.
Talking about France now, they've made no bones about the fact that they put club above country. So how does this work now? Can they play their full strength side, or do they have to still accommodate something else? What's their approach to this going to be?
Yeah, the club owners, they wear the pants in France, and they rule and they dictate things. Fabien Galtier has to go hat in hand. Please, sir, may I use one of your players? They have the player. They don't belong to the French national union. You can see a difference. Like, think about how Sia Kulisi, Etzebeth, those kind of players, how they structure their brain around test versus club, and how there's no question at all when Andre Pollard says to Michael Cheika at Leicester, I'm playing for the Boks. Cheika's like, great, do it. He wants his players to play. That's not the case for French club owners. They have the phantom injuries, the Jan Serfontein forever injury, the Bismarck Duplessis got a bad neck injury. It's all made up. It's smoke and mirrors. So top 14 and Pro D2 rule. They have more money by multiples than any other league. They are the only rugby league that makes money on the level of, proper sports leagues in the world. And so money talks. And so Galtier will have to request. Now, the games that I know he will have a full squad for will be the All Black game. And I'm not sure about Argentina. And then, I think the way they schedule these games and the way that they've approached next year's tour to New Zealand, it's not serious. It's not a serious test rugby nation in terms of caring. So what we have to look forward to, what we might enjoy the most, is New Zealand versus France. Now, the French beat the All Blacks in the pool game and took too much away from it. I think they believed in themselves too much post that win, and it cost them. Then they played too much against the Boks, got ran off their feet. They were exhausted in the final 20, and Dupont and his brothers were just reduced to just walking statues, easy to strip, easy to tackle, easy to predict. It's all because they just believed believe their own hype. I think the All Blacks are on a revenge tour. They want revenge against Ireland, even though they beat them in the World Cup, because they're just tired of Ireland. They're just sick of them and they want to beat them. I think they want the French. I think All Blacks are looking at the French and they circle that one and they go, we need to make sure that the balance of power is redressed. And that's where we get back into this North versus South thing. So it's being played north of the equator, most of these games. I know there's a bit of a scramble because a lot of the teams are coming from different places, like the Western Hemisphere or Japan is sort of considered south, for this purposes. But generally speaking, we have the Rugby Championship plus Fiji up against the Big Five of the North, with Wales being the orphan stepchild at the moment. And I do think that New Zealand has scores to settle with the North and doesn't really enjoy this narrative that's building up, that it's Ireland and the Springboks at the top, with the Boks clearly, on top, but right there with them is Ireland. So Ireland's replaced the All Blacks as the tougher win. And then they don't really like that the French have sort of elbowed their way in without testing themselves proper. We'll come tour you in New Zealand next year, but we're not going to take our best guys. We're going to tour Argentina earlier this year. We're not going to take our best guys. So I think the All Blacks are salivating at the idea of going to Paris, proper team, everyone named, all the top guys in the team and beat them. And they want to beat them, I think, handsomely. When you look at the lineup for the All Blacks, you can tell that starting back line it's geared to score tries. And so I think they want to come back and show the French who's boss. I think they want a narrative that's back to the old days, which is it's the All Blacks going to dethrone the Springboks or not. That's the real issue. And everyone else is bystanders. Between you and me, I don't think that's true. I think Ireland deserves their spot in the top two of the world. They've proved it. They've done it muscularly. They've done it quick. They've done it different styles. We tried to outmuscle them in the pool game in France, and that didn't work exactly. And then even at home, they were just a really tough adversary. So, we can look at this the other way. Would I like to see New Zealand punish the French? Absolutely. I like it when the French lose. I'm not a closet French fan. I don't enjoy a lot of their skullduggery. I don't enjoy the way that they corrupt the game financially. I don't like the fact that they have so many people at the top levels got convicted of crimes last year. I don't think that's a good look for our sport.
Right, you mentioned the Rugby Championship plus Fiji. So let's talk about plus Fiji. That, have they settled down now? New coaches and lots of upheaval there. What's going on there? What can we expect from them?
So Fiji, Simon Rawalui built for more than just one campaign. And the most important relic of what Simon left, I think, was attention on set pieces. And so Mick Byrne has come in and taken over, and they're still very good at set pieces. And the reason why that's important is because you always knew in the old days what you could do to Fiji is, they're tough to play against. Yes. One-on-one, they're probably better than everyone else one-on-one. If you just had a one-on-one with a Fijian against anyone else in the world, they're just harder to tackle, and they can tackle you. But, rugby's not like that. You can shape and form a match that's more about tactical kicking and set pieces, and then you just beat them. So even a team like Wales, athletically inferior to Fiji, would win because they would just figure out a way to put you in the wrong spots, make you make an error, and then your scrum hadn't been practiced enough. That's not going to happen. So I actually think Fiji could beat Scotland. Scotland will not have some of their best players, like they would have Finn Russell, for example. It's outside the window. They're playing this weekend as well. That's the other blockbuster match. And Fiji now has the Fijian Drua, which plays in Super Rugby and did very well this year. 25 of their players for the tour, for the end of the year tour, are from the Drua. That's 25 from one team. If you believe in coherence and cohesiveness in sports, which it has some support, I think it's overblown, but it's not bad to have cohesiveness. So, 25, that's strong. So that means your set pieces tend to be better. That's the issue. Then you can plug in Tuasova and these like phenoms from the French leagues who are truly some of the best players in the world and are some of the best players in the top most lucrative leagues in the world, whether it's the ERC or top 14, and you plug them in strategic positions like a upper side flanker or a center, yeah, they're going to be a handful. So I have projected that they will beat Scotland and then Wales. If they beat Scotland, they will then become number 7 in the world. So it's legitimate to be talking about Fiji in this whole discussion. Beat Wales, they consolidate it, and the mathematics become difficult to supplant them. They have a chance, even though they have a tough closing game, they could literally leave this tour being ranked 6th or 7th in the world, which would be the highest they've ever been ranked. They've been ranked 7th before, but never 6th. So they go Scotland, Wales, and then Spain as a sort of a rest up, and then they end with Ireland. If there's one match I'm pointing everyone to, it's, assuming that what I've said comes true, it's Fiji versus Ireland. I think that's going to be a hell of a match. If there's one thing the Irish aren't that good at, as we saw at Loftus, is if you have, guys like Peter Steph Toy, Sia Khaleesi, and Jesse Creel running at them, and there's enough space, they're not the most robust of tacklers. We saw how many times Jesse Creel and Sia Khaleesi bumped someone off in the same series. So Fiji's a bit of a nightmare because they kind of play like the All Blacks used to play, wild abandon, at such speed and with such power. So I'm actually thinking that Fiji could have a pretty good tour. My caveat to that is if they start badly. If they start badly, that they're not really, they actually do hang their heads. But if they beat Scotland, Wales, and Spain, and they're coming into Ireland knowing that they could finish number 6 in the world or even higher, it might be even higher, that's going to be a hell of a match in Aviva.
The big question, of course, is who's going to be number 1 in the world on the rankings. You mentioned it before, and we might stumble a bit. So we as South African supporters and everything else, the big 3 games are going to be South Africa, England, and Wales. And I'll just say here, we're going to run a competition that you can predict the score of each match, and it's R1,000 for each game to be won. So it's going to be on Sit and Cause's Facebook page. I'll put the details in the description below. It's going to start next Monday, so make sure you subscribe to that. So you're going to go over there. Which matches do you plan on attending?
Yeah, I'm going to finalize that today, but my plan is to go see Ireland, New Zealand on the 8th, and then on the 10th be at Murrayfield for Scotland hosting the Boks. So we'll see if I can pull it off. There are other matches that are very intriguing too, by the way. There's some very interesting lower billing teams, like Namibia plays UAE and Belgium plays Hong Kong. I mean, there's a lot of weird matches, like Chile comes and plays Belgium. And so there are probably some other matches I could catch, but for sure I'm targeting those two. I love Murrayfield. I love Edinburgh, Scotland. I like everything about that town. And I really think that the Bok game against Scotland is going to be entertaining. There's just something about it that makes me think it's going to be a high-scoring Springbok record win. I'm predicting the biggest win over Scotland in history in Scotland.
Right. So you and I are going to have directly afterwards, after the test, we're going to have a talk, get a bit of immediate feedback. You're at the stadium. It's going to be incredible. But also after each game of the major games through this entire month, so either going to be you and me or you and Brett on the 8-9 combo, which will be published on this channel as well. That's going to be exciting. It's always nice to get immediate feedback. Your test match post-mortems are quite legendary, don't you think?
Murrayfield is got good Wi-Fi too. Now, when you get out of Murrayfield, the whole thing is built on this really steep hill, and it's just mud because Scotland's got the problem of too much water, not the problem of not enough water. It's never a drought there, but it's just mud. But fantastic food, some of the best halftime entertainment in the world. They have proper rock bands, and it's just a great vibe. So I'm looking forward to Murrayfield and being able to report on what I'm predicting is a record win. That's not Vinchat, that's not arrogance. It's that I just think that Scotland's going to run into a buzzsaw here because you have one of the most confident versions and vintages of the Bok team, but confidence for a reason, like hard, long-built belief in yourself with evidence for that belief. It's not puffed up. It's not, ahead of yourself. It's the games that we played this year against Ireland and the All Blacks, and then the winning in style against a very good Argentina team, just putting them away, it tells me that, and the fact that the players are rested, Jasper Wiese is not overplayed. He's got plenty of, fire in those legs. The fact that you might have a guy like Hanekom come off, and he's just the kind of player, and as the people from Scotland know very well from the URC, he's difficult in the open field. Archie Snyman, in the form of his life. I mean, he's just, there are so many things you could plug into here, whether it's bomb squad-ish or starting with those guys, that you could see that there's just too much to handle. And on top of that, I think the back line has never been more lethal. That midfield is running as the best midfield in ages that I've seen, Damien and Jesse. And the wings just look like they're untacklable in space. I guess one of the big questions I've got is fullback. Is it going to be get Willie to 100 and then say goodbye, or will we see more fussy? Does Jordan Hendrickson get a game at all, or is it just he's just there to make sure that we have cover? And then we're going to go back to the same old thing, I know, which is the 9-10 combinations. That's the favorite sport of Bok watchers. Everyone's got their guy that they love. They overlook his errors. Mani Lubbock has a shocker of a game, and no one ever says, oh, look at Mani. They just look at the good ones. Same thing with Pollard. There's some people that just cannot see him as an inventive, creative player, even though at Leicester Tigers, he's been killing it with, 30-meter flat passes across the line that, very few people make except for Owen Farrell. So, I think literally we're looking at a team spoiled for choice. I have an inkling that Tony Brown, when he started this job, was looking at this end of year tour as the culmination of his work all through the year, and that he's the one who is probably the most excited about this and is getting the guys excited. What I'm hearing is that he's a guy that's fun to be around. He's an interesting fellow. He's not just like everyone else. He's a different sort of cat, but he's bringing something out of some of the players. It's not a coincidence that Jesse Creel is having one of the greatest seasons of his life. It's not pure luck that you're seeing Peter Steptoe do different things on the field, and Sia Khaleesi as well. So, I'm thinking this could be one of our most favorite end of the year tours that we've had in a while.
All right, so we'll talk about the actual teams next week. So lots of talks about, getting to the run-up. We'll know what Scotland did against Fiji, get a better idea of what England and New Zealand are up to. So it's going to be set up nicely next week, and we'll dive into that a bit more. So I think we covered everything. Thanks. That's interesting.
It's a wrap.
Yeah, can you believe it?
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and Mbia Vella, brought to you by Sit and Cards.